I wrote a letter to a friend a long time ago when he was nobody and I was nobody. And I thought that between the two of us, we could start to become somebody by treating each other as if we were indeed the people or the writers we wanted to be. He was in Copenhagen, and I had waited for more than a year for a letter from him. When it came, it contained a couple of things he had written with the hope of publishing, lots of self-criticism, and some advice for me. It was a long letter, poorly written, which I was asked to overlook. I think I'll just let this communique dream, let it go where it may, and perhaps you can extract something from it worthwhile. The letter did dream on and on until he asked that I forgive his typing too. You must forgive my typing. Concentration on it is a barrier to my ideas. So let me be sloppy. My friend hadn't changed much. Skip was always asking that I overlook the grip he had on things, but I never would, at least not until I had told him that one day reality was going to smack the shit out of him. That one day he was going to have to deal with his dreams, that is, begin to run them through a typewriter. And since that terrible day could not really be put off, the very next day was as good as any to begin the task of becoming a writer. I don't think Skip ever suspected that I was also giving myself hell, but that I wanted to send him through it first, because it was only beginning to dawn on me that the only way I was going to find out what I thought was to become a writer too. But this I kept to myself, and because I did, I never excused Skip for writing anything I thought was bad. A letter he wrote to a girl he'd met in Frankfurt is a good case in point. I gave him hell about that letter. I kept saying that a writer could not approach a piece of paper with an erection. Skip grabbed the letter out of my hand and shouted that it was not for publication, that it was just to a babe he'd met in a bar and was merely trying to make some time with. When I would not accept that as an excuse for how the letter was written, Skip bent over the little table in the PX that we were sitting at and asked, "Who can write in the Army?" I said, a writer could write in the Army. And while I had his attention, I said, a writer would never offend a piece of paper. Shit. You're a bitch with that shit, Younger. All I wanted to do was screw. You hear that? And that letter, as bad as I know it is going to get me a piece of ass. Sure, the letter stinks, but what do you think the babe wants to hear? I said, it isn't what she wants to hear that I'm talking about. I'm talking about a bad letter written by someone who wants to be a writer. That's what I'm talking about. Let me show you what I mean, I said, reaching for the letter. Skip drew back. Damn the letter. Drink your coffee and get off my back. When his letter came, I hadn't argued with Skip for more than 2 years. That I looked forward to it was due to the fact that I'd been running my dreams through typewriters, and to the fact that I disagreed sharply with several points he made in his long-awaited letter, and had to say some things I hope will not end a friendship that means a lot to me. In a letter to him, I have said, I am going to give you hell because you are in a can of beans with no legible label. You are, if you will, without definition, in a sense that I shall get to. And it shows in your writing. But before I go on, let me say that I love you, in that way that men should be able to speak of loving each other. That has nothing to do with how most people use the word, for they use it loosely, or with too many restraints upon it. Then not as I am using it now, to embrace a dangerous commitment to someone. Dangerous in the sense that one feels a legitimate right to exercise privilege, to speak frankly, to, as it were, walk heavily upon that commitment, to almost strain it, without doing just that, permanently. It is in this sense that I love you. You ask me, why did I want to integrate into something negative? I thought that was cute, but not the least bit profound. In the way you put it, it was but a way of saying nothing, of semantically detaching yourself from something by which you are defined. Everyone in Copenhagen knows who you are. I mean the who you are that has taken refuge in that cold place. What is lamentable, however, is that I don't think you are trying to detach yourself from your past, the 20-odd years spent growing up in Massachusetts, for the purpose of dealing with it. You are trying, instead, to turn your back on it. But what you forget, and I think you stand in the danger of forgetting many things about that experience, as long as you live in Denmark, is that you still like collard greens, chitterlings, and hot dogs, that you are, nevertheless, still an American Negro. You are only thousands of miles from home. You have made, then, a terrible mistake, asking me such a foolish question. Why do you want to integrate into something negative? Because no one wants to integrate into something that is by definition ugly. You do me an injustice, for you should have given me credit for being after something that negates the ugliness that is uppermost in your mind when you refer to the American experience that I'm supposed to be going through as something negative. You have, accordingly, assumed too damn much. First, that I'm trying to integrate myself into the life of this country, because you have not assumed something much more important, simply that I have been thoroughly integrated into the life of this republic, the proof of which is not that I cannot be the president of General Motors, but rather that, in spite of it, I consider myself an American, and this country's traditions as my own. The second, and possibly the gravest assumption on your part, is that you believe that distance has given you a new perspective on the woes of this country. You have two things which I believe led you to that assumption: a new address and a white wife. Moreover, I believe that having crashed the illusion of the latter has given you only another dependent, that both things have actually dulled the perspective you might have had. A new perspective can only be gained at the expense of coming to terms with something of consequence. As I see it, you have come to terms with nothing in Copenhagen, except perhaps a hospitality that would get on my nerves. Not because I would not be able to appreciate it, but because it would be appreciated. And that, oddly enough, would in the end remind me of who I am, and that what I want more than anything is to be able to dine as comfortably at home in my country. That I know Danish manners are not to be surpassed on these shores is no revelation that would send me down to the nearest travel agency, What is a revelation is that I know I am committed to an ugliness, to a negativity of tremendous consequence, because I shall never be able to turn my back on it. At any rate, you have a commitment. My commitment is yours too, whether you choose to face it or not. To your wife, which I bring up not to throw in your face, but to say that that commitment to her and all the little ones that she will lovingly give us is one that I believe has you scared. Thus, the desperate attempt to deal with the reality of the Negro here, from where you are, safe. Accordingly, you take living in Denmark too seriously, and having been raised in the United States, not seriously enough. For one should let nothing make of one's natural commitment to the essence of a way of life ridiculous, because its reality is a long way from utopia. For it is in such a reality, the imperfect one, that there is a need to find a truth that runs beneath the lies of conviction and espousal, that brought to the surface of our lives might make us change. I would like to think that you are on to such a truth, that such a truth is enmeshed in your two worlds, the one you have geographically turned your back on, and the one your mail is to be forwarded to. It should come, then, as no surprise that I found something wrong with your statement. You should leave America. Your invitation is an offer that I cannot accept, because I don't want to be a Negro expatriate. But I know by your refusal to come back that you feel different, that you feel that there is in this house a lot of hate to run away from. Would that you knew, could appreciate, though, that if this house burns down, a way of life will have been proven beyond the grasp of men, that there will be only a few peninsulas for the disheartened realist to run to. For on trial here is the question of whether a significant minority can live with a majority in peace and justice. This is not a national issue that Denmark has solved for us. It is going to be a problem for the world that America is now getting a crack at. As for your offer, I see it as no more than a temptation. It is you, then, really, who should come home. I say this now because I can no longer believe that you stayed in Europe in order to write. It seems you've stayed for reasons that have become much more important. Suffice to say that I don't think you had to go to the top of the world to write. That I was willing to believe that maybe you did was due to the fact that I wanted to believe that in the States you would have been robbed of the desire to keep at writing, although you had never really given writing in the States a chance. I have. And I tell you from that vantage point that the pressure that you have run away from, being in the midst of it, for me is indistinguishably a part of why I'm writing. Indeed, I doubt whether I would have felt the need to put on paper what I thought if I had stayed in Europe. That I feel a compulsion to do so here is unstatably tied into a sense of definition, a feeling that my reality is of a real consequence to this place, that my being counts in this country having given me the references that I have, on which basis I take myself seriously. But you, how can you take yourself? It seems you have been robbed of a future, for present tense have no real consequence. for you are not really a part of the reality of Denmark. What is left to you then are the years you stay where you are to write about something, the possibility being strong that if you continue to write about America from a distance, that what you will most likely capture in what you write is a sense of being cut off, as a result of which you end up cute. You are someone Europeans can mistake for an Italian on holiday. You are someone the students at the university will be glad to have come talk to them about the racial tense in this country, and after you have, be no better off because you did. Right now, you are playing a role, and you are getting a lot of attention from curious people, from people for whom you have no message, that they are more in need of getting than that audience in this country that you are afraid of facing, that you have chosen to work in a vacuum, instead of in that society that you have a legitimate stake, is for me proof that you have succumbed to a need that has nothing to do with writing or becoming a writer. Because of this belief, I wish I could make it perfectly clear that Europe is not the place to be, that you can achieve no worth there. Your existence posing for Europe, no problem. That is why you can rest there, if you've gone to pieces. But you have had no breakdown. And yet you have found a hole, Europe, and crawled into it. From it you have written. Most Negroes living in Europe, regardless of how long they've been here, still maintain a vague and lingering loyalty toward the States. You wrote that at a time when such loyalty does not count. That is one reason why the piece you sent me, The Negro Expatriate, did not come off. In it, you and the people you wrote about face no commitment. What Expatriate amounted to was a few pages from a not too personal diary that you are keeping about people who no longer count. But for you, these people are an interesting lot. For you, they embody a significance. If you could capture it and render it of particular importance to Americans, you might achieve something worthwhile. That you did not, I think, is due to the fact that the Negro Expatriate has nothing to say to us, only goodbye. With that said, he is only bothered with what you called vague and lingering loyalty. Then obviously, Baldwin's return to America after 10 years on the continent, and why, have had less effect on you than the quality of Richard Wright's works after he fled to Paris. From Wright's mistake and Baldwin's realizations, you have learned nothing. No doubt you like thinking of yourself in terms of Wright, but with a shorter memory than his, and no reputation to sustain you, while you try to conjure up a reality to put in a book. You have everything to lose in Europe. That is why I wanted you to read Baldwin's essays. I thought he could crash that illusion of Europe that a black boy can get hopelessly lost in, that Wright seems to have been lost in when he wrote those 5 bad episodes about Negroes living in Paris that appeared in Herbert Hill's Soon One Morning. Even Wright's White Man Listen was a great letdown. I know I felt that he could not have written that bad book in Mississippi or New York, as if he knew the audience he had had was walking out on him. He entitled that book what he was shouting at the world from Paris: White Man, listen. Which is to say, indirectly, that there was about your essay something pathetic too. It was your approach to the runaway Negro, one would have had to guess that you are one of that species, the Negro expatriate, because you did not write the piece so that it would be unmistakably clear that you knew personally what you were talking about. For some reason, you kept shoving other runaway Negroes uninterestingly at the reader. In that way, you managed to tell us nothing about your realizations as an expatriate. Consequently, I don't know what to make of your problem. Vague and lingering loyalty doesn't arouse even sympathy. At any rate, the expatriate in your case is merely a glorification of what you are that you have pulled over your head. But then, you are safe. So safe that your being does not count. Not in the sense that it once did. When you were steeped in a world you had to deal with in order to keep from having your humanity pressured out of you. Then you always felt threatened, which was the very essence of being, of knowing that you counted, knowing that you could prove it with the very concepts this country said it believed the good society was based on. And now, when you might have proved that, you have run away, have chosen another reality, not half as real. You are, accordingly, somewhat of a coward.